The sun had started its slow descent over the endless stretch of desert, painting the sky in shades of fire and sorrow. Wind whispered across the dunes, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and something heavier, something that smelled like the end of a long, painful road. A black horse moved steadily down a lonely trail, its hooves kicking up dust that glowed gold in the dying light. The man riding it, Ethan Cole, was a rancher, broad-shouldered, sunburned and quiet like the land he worked. He wasn't the kind of man who asked for company or gave much talk. Out here, the silence was his only companion. But that evening, silence broke. At first, Ethan thought it was the cry of some desert animal, a coyote maybe. Then it came again, higher, sharper, trembling like a soul torn in half. It wasn't an animal. It was a child. He slowed his horse, eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. The sound came from a small rise just ahead. There, at the foot of a dry bush, he saw her. No more than 7 years old, barefoot, hair tangled and face streaked with dust and tears. She was clutching something in her lap. As he drew closer, he saw what it was. A woman, still, pale, her hand half buried in the sand. Ethan dismounted, his boots sinking softly into the dust. The little girl looked up at him, her blue eyes wild with fear and confusion. She didn't move, didn't blink, just held that lifeless hand tighter. "Ma'am?" Ethan said softly, kneeling beside the body. He touched the woman's wrist, cold, long gone. The girl let out a sob that cut through him like a knife. "Don't touch her!" she screamed, wrapping her small arms around her mother's still body. "She's just sleeping." "She'll wake up soon?" Ethan froze. He'd seen death more times than he cared to count. Ranch accidents, sickness, hunger. But something about that trembling child hit him harder than any bullet could. He took off his hat, holding it to his chest. "I'm sorry, kid," he said quietly. "She's gone." The little girl shook her head again and again, pressing her face into the woman's torn dress. "No, you're lying!" Mama said we'd make it to the river. She promised. Ethan looked around. No wagon, no footprints except theirs. Just the desert stretching to forever. He could guess what had happened. A mother trying to cross the Badlands with her child, hoping to find water or work or mercy. And the desert had taken her before she found any. He sighed deeply, feeling the weight of it in his bones. "What's your name, kid?" The girl didn't answer. She only whispered, "Mama." The wind picked up, tossing sand across the lifeless form. Ethan stood, looking down at them both, the mother who had given everything she had, and the child she'd left behind. He'd seen orphaned calves before, lost in the wild. Some survived if someone took them in. Most didn't. He didn't have to think twice. "All right," he muttered, half to himself. "You're coming with me, kid." The girl looked up, her face streaked with tears and grit. "No," she whispered hoarsely. "I can't leave her." Ethan crouched again, his voice low but firm. "Listen, your mama wouldn't want you to stay here. The coyotes will come by sundown. You want to protect her? You let me help." She hesitated, her little hand gripping her mother's sleeve. Finally, she nodded. Ethan lifted the woman's body gently, carried her a few feet to a shaded spot near a rock, and began to dig. His hands were rough, his heart heavier with every scoop of sand. The girl sat beside him the whole time, clutching her doll, her tears falling silently. When it was done, Ethan laid the woman to rest and bowed his head. "She'd done her best," he whispered. "Now it's my turn." He stood and reached for the girl's hand. "Come on." She didn't move. She just looked up at him and asked, "Where are we going?" He glanced toward the horizon, where the last light of day met the open plains. "To my ranch. You'll be safe there." As he lifted her onto the horse, she clung to the doll and glanced back one last time at the small mound of sand. The sunset burned red behind it, like a promise fading into night. They rode in silence for a while. The child's head rested against his chest, her breathing uneven. When they passed a ridge, she finally spoke. "My name's Lily." Ethan nodded. "That's a fine name." She looked up at him. "What's yours?" "Ethan Cole." The wind whistled through the canyons, and somewhere a wolf cried out in the distance. The desert swallowed them as night came down like a curtain. Ethan looked down at the fragile, little thing in his arms and thought of how life had a cruel way of testing the ones least ready for it. He'd lost people too, his wife years ago, and the unborn child they'd never met. Since then, his heart had been locked away behind fences higher than his barns. But tonight something cracked. He didn't say it aloud, but deep inside a vow took root. He would not let this child be another soul lost to the desert. As they rode under the rising moon, he whispered quietly, "You'll be all right now, kid. I promise." And the desert, cold and silent, seemed to listen. The first morning at the coal ranch broke. With a thin layer of fog resting over the pastures, the sun, half hidden behind the mountains, poured soft light over the land, golden, calm, and almost holy. But for Ethan Cole, the day didn't begin with peace. It began with silence. He stood by the corral fence, leaning against the wood, a cup of coffee steaming in his calloused hands. His horse, Dusty, grazed quietly near the trough. And inside the small ranch house behind him, a child sat at the table staring at a bowl of oatmeal gone cold. Lily hadn't said a word since they arrived the night before. She'd walked inside without protest, sat where Ethan told her, and stayed silent while he made her something to eat. When he showed her the spare room and told her to get some rest, she only nodded, holding her little ragged doll close like it was her last piece of the world. Now as the ranch woke to the sounds of chickens, creaking wood, and the first calls of morning, Ethan felt that same quiet pressing on his chest. He wasn't good with words. Never had been. He could break a wild horse in half the time it took most men to make one stand still. But talking to a child, especially one broken by grief, was something else entirely. He took a slow sip, staring at the rising sun. From behind him, the screen door creaked. Lily stepped out, barefoot again, wearing one of his late wife's old shirts that hung loose on her small frame. Her eyes were puffy from crying. Her hair was tangled, half hiding her face. She didn't look at him, just walked to the fence and stood beside him, small and quiet as a shadow. "You sleep any?" Ethan asked gently. No answer. He sighed, scratching his jaw. Figured as much. She hugged her doll tighter. The wind brushed past, carrying the faint scent of hay and morning dew. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan nodded toward the corral. "You ever been around horses before?" Lily glanced up, then shook her head slightly. "Well," he said, pushing himself off the fence, "that's about to change." He opened the gate and led Dusty forward. The big brown gelding snorted softly, nostrils flaring at the new scent of the girl. Ethan motioned for her to come closer. "He won't bite," he said. "Not unless you're made of apples." For a split second, he thought he saw it, a flicker of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "Go on," Ethan urged. "Let him smell your hand." Lily hesitated, then slowly reached out. Her little fingers trembled as Dusty's warm breath brushed her palm. The horse gave a soft snort and nudged her hand gently as if saying hello. Her eyes widened. "He's soft." Ethan's heart stirred. It was the first word he'd heard her say since that night in the desert. "Yeah," he said softly, a hint of a smile on his own lips. "He's got a good soul, like most things out here. Just needs a bit of trust." For the next few days, the ranch settled into a quiet rhythm. Ethan worked the fields, fixed fences, tended to the animals, same as always. But now, there was a new presence on the land. Lily followed him everywhere. She didn't talk much, but she watched, curious, cautious, like a stray cat testing a new home. When Ethan shoveled hay, she carried a smaller fork and tried to help. When he filled the water troughs, she stood beside him, silent but steady. And every evening when the sun dropped low and the sky turned orange, she sat by the porch steps with her doll, staring out toward the desert. Ethan noticed she always faced the same direction, the way they'd come. Sometimes he'd see her whispering, her lips moving in faint words meant for someone who wasn't there, her mother. One evening, as the crickets began to sing and the stars blinked awake, Ethan stepped outside with 2 mugs of warm milk. He handed one to her, but she didn't take it. "I know," he said, sitting beside her. "You miss her." The girl didn't answer. Her eyes glistened in the moonlight. Ethan looked out at the horizon, his voice rough and quiet. "I lost someone once, too." That made her look up. "My wife," he said. "Long time ago. She got sick. Doctors couldn't help her. For a while I didn't talk to nobody. Just worked the land and waited for the hurt to stop." He paused, setting the mug down beside him. "But it don't stop. It just gets quieter, like the wind after a storm. You still hear it, but it don't tear you apart no more." Lily's lips trembled. "Does it ever feel better?" Ethan nodded slowly. "One day, yeah. You start to remember the love more than the pain. That's when you know they're still with you." She stared at her hands, thinking. Then for the first time she said, Mama said we'd find water. She said we'd start a new life. Ethan's chest tightened. She was right about that, Lily. You did find it. It just looks different than she thought. Lily finally took the mug, sipping the milk quietly. That night she didn't cry before bed. And when Ethan peeked into her room, she was asleep, clutching the doll with a faint smile on her lips. Days turned into weeks. The girl began to laugh sometimes, short, sudden bursts that startled even her. Ethan would pretend not to notice, but deep inside, something old and forgotten stirred back to life. One morning, as the two of them rode out to check the north fence, she asked, "Ethan, can I learn to ride?" He chuckled. "You think you're ready? I can try." He looked down at her determined little face and saw a spark there. A spark that wasn't there before. "All right," he said. "Let's see what you got." He lifted her onto the saddle, standing beside the horse as she took the reins. Dusty shifted gently, sensing her small weight. "Now keep your feet steady," Ethan said. "Hold tight and talk to him nice. Horses don't like yelling. They listen better when you whisper." Lily nodded, her tiny boots pressing against the stirrups. "Okay, easy, Dusty." The horse moved forward slowly, guided by her small hands. Ethan walked beside her, ready to catch her if she slipped. But she didn't. She laughed, a sound clear and bright as wind chimes. "Look, Ethan. I'm doing it!" He smiled, shading his eyes with his hand. "That you are, kid." The sun shone down warm and forgiving, the land stretching endless and golden before them. For the first time, the ranch didn't feel so lonely. That evening, as the day died in streaks of pink and gold, Lily ran to Ethan with a handful of wildflowers. "For you," she said. He blinked, taken aback. "What for?" "For helping me," she whispered. Ethan looked at the flowers, rough, uneven, half crushed in her hand, but to him, they were the most beautiful thing he'd seen in years. "Thank you, Lily," he said softly. "Means more than you know." As he placed them in a small jar by the window, he felt it again, that quiet promise he'd made the night he found her. To protect her, to give her a chance, and maybe, just maybe, to heal himself too. That night before sleep took him, Ethan whispered into the darkness, "You did good today, kid." The wind outside rustled through the grass, carrying with it a peace he hadn't known in a long time. The morning sun rose red that day, deep, almost angry red, spilling its fire over the plains like a warning. The wind carried dust across the open land, whispering through the fences and trees, making the ranch creak and groan like an old man remembering his pain. Ethan Cole stood on the porch, his rifle resting by the door. Something in his gut told him the peace they'd built was about to be tested. It had been months since he'd found Lily in the desert. In that time, the ranch had changed, or maybe he had. The laughter of a little girl now echoed through the barn every morning. The old place felt alive again. Lily had learned to ride, to feed the horses, to help with the chores. She still had nightmares sometimes, waking in the middle of the night crying for her mama. But Ethan was always there, sitting by her bedside until she drifted back to sleep. She'd filled the silence in his life, and he'd filled the emptiness in hers. But that morning, as Dusty neighed nervously and the cattle stirred, Ethan felt the weight of trouble rolling in on the wind. He'd learned long ago to trust that feeling. Around midday, while fixing the gate near the east pasture, he saw it, a trail of dust rising far in the distance. Riders, maybe 2, maybe 3. Ethan narrowed his eyes, wiping the sweat from his brow. The ranch was miles from the nearest town. Nobody came out this way unless they had a reason. He saddled Dusty and rode to higher ground, the girl watching from the porch. "Ethan, where you going?" she called. "Just checking something, kid," he said, forcing a smile. "You stay inside, all right?" She nodded, though worry flickered in her eyes. From the ridge, Ethan got a better look. 3 men on horseback, dark coats, wide hats. They rode slow, like men with purpose. The kind who weren't lost, they were hunting. When they got closer, Ethan's jaw tightened. The man in front was broad-shouldered, with a scar down his cheek and eyes cold as steel. He'd seen that face before. In the wanted posters back in Yuma. Jed Carter, a name that carried trouble. Ethan rode down to meet them halfway, his hand resting near his holster. Carter grinned when he saw him. "Well, I'll be damned. Ethan Cole. Didn't think you were still alive out here in the dirt." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "Didn't think you'd ride this far without a reason." Carter leaned forward on his saddle. "I got one. You found a woman and a kid out in the desert a while back. Ethan's pulse slowed and cold steady. Why do you ask? The man spat into the sand. 'Cause that woman stole from me. Took a bag of silver and ran. Should have died out there, but rumor says her brat survived. You seen her? Ethan didn't blink. Ain't seen no one like that. Carter studied him, eyes sharp. You sure about that, cowboy? Ethan's grip on the reins tightened. Sure as the sun's hot, the outlaw smirked. We'll see. I think I'll take a look around that ranch of yours. Ethan's tone hardened. You won't be taking a step past my fence, Carter. The man's smile faded. For a long, tense moment, the only sound was the wind whistling through the grass. Then Carter leaned back in his saddle. You always were stubborn, Cole, but I'll find that girl. And when I do, you best stay out of it. Ethan watched them ride off, dust trailing behind. His jaw clenched, his mind racing. That night, he loaded his rifle and double-checked every lock. Lily could tell something was wrong. Ethan? She whispered as he tucked her in. Why are you sad? He forced a smile. Ain't sad, Lily, just tired. But when she closed her eyes, he whispered a different truth, one she couldn't hear. I won't let them touch you. Not while I'm breathing. The next morning came fast and too fast. The outlaws didn't wait long. Ethan heard the horses before he saw them. He stepped outside, rifle ready. Carter called out from the fence. Last chance, Cole. Hand over the kid and we'll leave you be. Ethan stepped forward. You ride one step closer and I'll put you in the ground. Carter laughed, drawing his pistol. You always did talk big. The gunfire broke the morning quiet. Ethan dove behind a trough as bullets cracked through the air, splintering wood and kicking up dust. Dusty reared, screaming. The ranch exploded into chaos. The smell of gunpowder, the echo of death. Inside the house, Lily hid under the bed, clutching her doll, tears streaking her cheeks. She could hear Ethan's shouts, the gunfire, the rage of men who'd never known mercy. Then silence. A single shot, and silence. She waited, shaking, her breath ragged. The door creaked open. Heavy boots stepped inside. Carter's voice. Where are you, little thief? Lily bit her lip to keep from crying out. Carter's shadow passed across the floor. He kicked the chair aside, lifted the table, searched every corner. When he leaned down to look under the bed, a gun clicked behind him. Move and I'll send you to hell, Ethan growled. Carter froze. Slowly he turned, sneering. You're a fool, Cole. You're gonna die for a kid that ain't even yours. Ethan's eyes burned. Don't gotta be mine to matter. The outlaw lunged. Too fast, too wild. The gun went off. Carter stumbled, blood spreading across his chest. He fell to the floor, gasping. The light in his eyes faded. Ethan stood there a moment, breathing hard, then dropped to one knee. You all right, kid? Lily crawled out, eyes wide, tears streaming. I thought you were gone. He smiled weakly. Takes more than that to stop me. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. He held her tight. The world outside fading into silence again. Not the silence of fear this time, but peace. Later, as the sheriff's men took the bodies away, Ethan stood by the porch, Lily beside him. The sky was turning gold again. You did it, she said softly. He looked down at her. We did it, Lily, together. She smiled. Can we stay here forever? Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. As long as you want, kid. This ranch is yours now, too. The wind rustled through the fields, carrying the scent of rain, the first drops in months. Life returning to the land. As the two of them watched the storm roll in, Ethan thought of the woman in the desert, the mother who had given everything for this child. I kept my promise, he whispered. She's safe now. And as the rain began to fall, washing away the dust and the blood, it felt like the desert itself was finally at peace. Sometimes family isn't born, it's found. Out in the wild where the world forgets mercy, one man and one child found hope again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of courage, kindness, and redemption from the Old West.